Great. Well, I'm so excited to be interviewing you, Brian. You are known as an advocate, an author. You've been very open about your entrepreneurial journey, writing your book, and you are so vulnerable about so many things, mental health. If you could wrap up who you are in a nutshell to everybody watching this right now, how would you describe yourself?
A flawed human being just trying to do the next right thing every day, changing my little part of the world with acts of kindness.
Okay, so what are some examples of how sharing your story and being vulnerable has helped others?
One that particularly resonates with me is before I ever became a kind of a on the circuit speaker, I was doing a lot. Well, you know this because you hooked me up with these people. I was doing a lot of Rotary clubs, and I was speaking about body image and eating disorders. This was before I really started speaking about addiction. So I show up at this Rotary Club at Dallas to talk about body image and eating disorders. I walk in there and it's a bunch of 50-year-old men and 60-year-old men. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a tough audience. I mean, the drool's going to be coming out of their mouths. Talk about eating disorders to these people. So part of my talk also includes talk about family and my father and things like that and our closeness. So I finish up the talk, and there was some interest because people had children who were struggling and grandchildren. But I walk out of there thinking I completely bombed. I get home and I open Twitter, and there was a message from a girl I didn't know. And it said, Brian, you don't know me, but my father's a lawyer and he was at your talk today. And we are getting together for the first time in a year. So my talk, and it had nothing to do with body image or eating disorders. It was about my relationship with my father and how that relationship with my family was instrumental in my recovery. So that resonates with me for some reason, because you just never know what lens people are going to hear your message through. And they're going to filter it through these different colored lenses, right? And whatever message, it may not be the message that you think is the message. So that really stands out.
You are the brother of Shark Tank celebrity Mark Cuban, the Mavs owner Mark Cuban. And I think the reason why so many people resonate with you is because you bring so much vulnerability and human element to losing your father and staying connected with your brothers. Tell me more about how you've been able to bring the vulnerability of the family element to your speaking platform.
Well, I think a lot of that is being very careful to understand that I am only an expert in my journey. It is not my place to hijack the journey of my family, my brothers. And so it really, whether everything I talk about, whether it's my relationship with Mark or Jeff, is through my lens. So I think when you do that, instead of trying to create this story that you think other people want, people see authenticity and they see vulnerability. So my story is my story, whether my brother is Mark Cuban or Joe Schnook, right? And now my brother being Mark Cuban may have impacted it in some way, and it has, but my story doesn't change. And I think when they see that, and when you are authentic, people take from that, well, okay, you're not trying to ride on his back, you're just sharing your journey, and that journey is separate and both interconnected to his, and it's impacted me in many different ways.
So, speaking of that, you just had a major win with your pre orders of your newest book, The Chaser. Can you tell us more about that book? What's it about? What has it been like writing a fiction book, first of all,
Sure.
and how you were able to succeed with all these pre orders?
It's been an interesting learning process and learning curve. The Ambulance Chaser is about a personal injury lawyer who struggles with drug and alcohol addiction, like there is in every lawyer in a thriller doesn't struggle with drug and alcohol addiction, right? It's kind of a trope, but parts of me are in this character, Jason Feldman, and he finds himself accused of the murder of a one-time high school classmate 30 years prior after her remains are discovered. He becomes a fugitive from justice to find the one person on the other side of the country in California who can prove his innocence, and he's the one person who can prove his innocence and save the life of Jason's son, who has been abducted. And it's been, I found that it is a much different skill set than writing memoir, because I know my story, and having to create characters and create interesting situations. You have to, it was a challenge. And you have to remember, there are only 8 or 9 plots in the world, right? Whatever you read, whatever movie you see, they're all the same 8 or 9 plots. You look at my plot, you're going to say, okay, the fugitive, this and that. Yes, there are no new plots, but there are interesting characters, interesting situations. That was a challenge. That was a challenge. And being a first-time fiction author, a first-time thriller fiction author, even though I have a reputation in the nonfiction field, getting people to pre-order the book was a challenge as well, because I have no reputation. I have no previous book in that field. So I had to do what I call door-to-door digital sales. And what that is you are basically, instead of just posting, you post on Twitter, you post on Facebook, you post on LinkedIn, but only a small percentage of people see those, right? You have to craft a message, a craft of story around your ask. And I literally reached out personally to over 10,000 LinkedIn contacts, 5,000 Twitter contacts, 5,000 Facebook contacts within a 2-month period. And it took forever. But I had a very high rate of return and very high rate of people pre-ordering my book. And pre-orders are important because that is how people take interest. That is how retailers take interest. That is how bestseller lists take interest. And as a first-time author of a fiction book with no reputation in fiction writing, I have almost 2,000 pre-sales, which is kind of unheard of.
That is a lot of pre-sales. Tell me about the process of writing this fiction book. Were you surprised at did you have any new emotional triggers that came up trying to develop these characters, or any new nightmares that you were unaware that would come in your path?
I explored things that I don't normally talk about. Again, when you write fiction, there's parts of all kinds of people. The people you meet along, there's probably part of you in one of my characters. People you meet along the way, that people, that you have come to know and like, and people you've become close to, whether they're good or bad, they're in there. And so Jason is very conflicted about his Jewish faith, and which is something I've struggled with. And his Holocaust history. So part of that, there was a kind of a journey there in the ambulance chaser. As far as addiction and stuff, there are some themes. And what I wanted to do, Cheri, with this character is not make it this typical, okay, the person's addicted and now he goes to residential treatment, rehab, and now he completes this arc and he's recovered and gets the girl. That doesn't always happen, right? I wanted there to be uncertainty, and I didn't want it to be the typical protagonist struggling, or anti-hero struggling with addiction, who just reaches this rock bottom and it's just awful. Jason kind of always just straddles. And his defining moment isn't anything terrible, where he says enough is enough. So I wanted to kind of break the trope of this must happen and this must happen if your protagonist is struggling with addiction. And for Jason, like Brian, it's cocaine and alcohol. So I just learned how hard it is to write. The ambulance chaser started with a dream years ago of throwing dead bodies into a fire as a teenager with my childhood best friend. And then all of a sudden the dream fast forwards into middle age, and I'm worried about getting caught for these bodies. The police are going to come and catch me, that have never been discovered. That's how the book started.
So have you already started thinking about your next book?
I started thinking about it's meant to be a series, and it's left like that. Like I said, the protagonist, Jason, doesn't fulfill a character arc. He has a lot of issues going on when the book ends. I don't want to give away too much, but yeah, it's meant to have a next book.
That's great. Well, I see that we are almost out of time. It was so nice chatting. I love how conversational it was. It was just like any of our other chats over coffee. I'd love to share Mark's stories till the sun came up, but we are out of time now, and I can't wait for everyone to see the interview, because there were so many nuggets in it. Is there anything else that you want anybody to know about yourself, your book, anything?
I mean, just let's finish on what I do. Recovery is possible. It just requires dropping that wall of shame for just a split second and reaching out to someone. And it's also okay for you to reach out to those you think are struggling and ask them how they're doing. And before that conversation breaks, ask them if they know that they can reach out to you anytime they want. The 2 ask rule. And you may change a life. You may save a life.
I love it. Thank you so much.